The first drop of census data has revealed what the typical Aussie looks like and highlights how much time men and women typically spend on housework. The Australian Bureau of Stats released a taster of the census 2016 data today, providing a profile of who the typical Australian is. According to the census, the typical Australian is a 38-year-old woman who has English ancestry and whose parents were both born in Australia. She is married, with 2 children, has completed year 12 and lives in a 3-bedroom house with 2 cars. She spends between 5 and 14 hours a week on domestic work. In contrast, the typical Aussie male is 37 years old and spends less than 5 hours on domestic work. Back in 1911, when the census was first taken, the typical Aussie was a 24-year-old male, but women have outnumbered men since 1979. The statistics also change significantly depending on which state you live in. For example, a typical Aussie lives in a 3-bedroom house, but if you are a Western Australia resident, you'll have a bigger 4-bedroom home. Those in Tasmania typically own their home outright, while the typical Northern Territory resident is a renter. Across Australia, people typically own their own home with a mortgage, but back in 2006, the typical Aussie owned their house outright. When it comes to migrants, the typical migrant was born in England and is 44 years old, but if you live in NSW, they are likely to be Chinese. Those in Queensland are likely to be from New Zealand. Today's data reveals initial findings of the 5-yearly survey that nearly didn't happen because of cyber attacks when the questionnaire was being conducted last August. The data was released 2 months earlier than any previous census. The full release of the survey will begin on June 27.